Financial infidelity destroys marriages just as completely as romantic betrayal. When Kevin and Angela Porter stood on the Family Feud stage in February 2025, they appeared to be the perfect middle-class family, hardworking, devoted to their children, building toward a comfortable future. But Kevin was carrying a secret that had been eating him alive for 2 years. $85,000 in hidden debt from a failed business venture he had never told his wife about. When the pressure of the game pushed him to finally confess, everyone expected his wife Angela to explode with anger and hurt. But what happened instead shocked Steve Harvey and the entire studio. Because sometimes the person we think we know best is capable of a grace and strength we never imagined. If you believe in the power of honesty and the strength of forgiveness, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We share the Family Feud moments that prove love can survive even our worst mistakes when we choose truth and partnership over fear and hiding. The Porter family from Detroit, Michigan walked onto the Family Feud stage with the kind of tired optimism that comes from people who work hard and hope for better days. Kevin Porter, 38, was a warehouse supervisor with calloused hands and worry lines that made him look older than his years. His wife Angela, 36, worked as a medical billing specialist, managing healthcare paperwork with precision and patience. Their 2 children, Jaden, 14, and Maya, 11, stood with them, excited to be on television but also aware of the tension their parents had been carrying lately. Kevin's younger sister Denise completed the family team, her presence a reminder of the family support system that had gotten them through tough times before. Steve Harvey greeted the family warmly, making his usual jokes about Detroit and asking about their lives. Kevin's responses were enthusiastic but slightly forced. Angela smiled, but Steve noticed how her eyes kept darting to her husband with a mixture of concern and something else, suspicion perhaps or hurt. There was a story here, Steve could feel it, something unspoken creating distance between this couple. Kevin Porter had always prided himself on being a provider. He had grown up poor, watching his mother work 3 jobs to keep their family afloat after his father left. He had promised himself that when he had a family of his own, his wife and children would never struggle the way he had. He would be the man his father hadn't been, reliable, present, and financially responsible. 2 years ago, Kevin thought he had found an opportunity to give his family more than just stability. He thought he could give them prosperity. His friend Marcus had a business idea, a mobile car detailing service targeting corporate parking lots. The numbers looked good. The market seemed ready. All Kevin needed to do was invest $20,000 to become a partner. Kevin knew Angela would have questions about investing their savings into an unproven business. She was the careful one, the planner, the person who triple-checked their budget and built emergency funds. So Kevin made a decision he would regret every day since he didn't tell her. He took the $20,000 from their savings and put it into the business, planning to tell Angela once the profits started rolling in. But the business failed. Marcus hadn't properly researched permits and insurance. Corporate buildings had liability concerns. Customers were harder to acquire than projected. Within 6 months, the business folded, taking Kevin's $20,000 with it. And then came the real disaster. Marcus had taken out additional loans in both their names without fully explaining the terms. Kevin was now responsible for $65,000 in business debt on top of the $20,000 he had lost. $85,000 in total. Debt that Angela knew nothing about. Debt that Kevin had been secretly making minimum payments on for 2 years, money he pulled from working overtime that Angela thought was going into their children's college funds. The weight of this secret was destroying Kevin from the inside. He worked extra shifts, took on side jobs, and barely slept. The stress was affecting his health, high blood pressure, stress headaches, digestive problems, but he couldn't tell Angela. He was too ashamed. He had betrayed her trust, squandered their savings, and jeopardized their financial future. Every day the secret grew heavier. Angela knew something was wrong. Kevin had become distant and irritable. He was working constantly, but they somehow had less money than before. When she asked questions, he became defensive. She had started to suspect an affair. What else would explain the secrecy, the unexplained absences, the defensive reactions when she asked where he had been? 3 weeks ago, Angela had checked their savings account to transfer money for Jaden's basketball camp. The account that should have had $12,000 had barely $3,000. When she confronted Kevin, he said there had been unexpected expenses, that he had taken care of it, that she should trust him. But the vagueness of his explanation only deepened her suspicion. Angela was hurt and angry, but she was also scared. She loved Kevin. They had built a life together. But she couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something big, something that threatened everything they had worked for. The Family Feud appearance had been planned months ago before the tension had escalated. Now it felt like a performance they were both going through the motions of completing. Denise, Kevin's sister, knew the truth. Kevin had confided in her 6 months ago when the debt had become overwhelming. She had begged him to tell Angela, warning him that the secret would eventually destroy his marriage. But Kevin kept putting it off, convinced he could somehow fix the problem before Angela ever had to know. Denise watched her brother sink deeper into depression and her sister-in-law grow more suspicious, and she felt helpless to stop the train wreck she saw coming. Kevin stood on the Family Feud stage feeling like a fraud. Here he was, pretending to be a good husband and father while hiding a financial catastrophe that could cost them their home, their children's college funds, their entire future. The guilt was suffocating, and some part of him knew that this charade couldn't continue much longer. The game progressed through the first few rounds with the Porter family competing well despite the underlying tension. Steve Harvey, always perceptive to family dynamics, kept making gentle jokes about marriage and trust, seemingly oblivious to how each comment landed like an arrow in Kevin's guilty conscience. Then came the question that would break everything open. Steve read from the card, "Name something a husband might hide from his wife." Kevin was at the podium. The question felt like it had been designed specifically to torture him. His mind went immediately to his hidden debt, to the $85,000 he had been concealing for 2 years. His hands started shaking, sweat beaded on his forehead. "Kevin, you okay?" Steve asked, noticing the man's visible distress. Kevin looked at Angela standing with their family. He looked at his children. He looked at Steve Harvey, and something inside him snapped. The burden of the secret, the weight of the lies, the exhaustion of pretending, it all became too much. "Debt," Kevin said, his voice cracking. "A husband might hide debt from his wife." The board revealed it was the number 2 answer. The audience applauded, but Kevin didn't move. He just stood there, staring at the word debt on the board. "Good answer," Steve said, starting to move on to the next contestant. "I have $85,000 in debt that my wife doesn't know about," Kevin said suddenly, the words tumbling out like water breaking through a dam. The studio went silent. Steve froze mid-step. Angela's face drained of color. "What?" Angela's voice was barely a whisper. Kevin turned to face his wife, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry, Angela. 2 years ago, I invested our savings in a business with Marcus. I didn't tell you because I thought it would be successful and I wanted to surprise you, but it failed, and there was debt I didn't know about, $85,000 that I've been trying to pay off by myself." Angela stood frozen, trying to process what she was hearing. 85,000. That's why the savings are gone. That's why you've been working all those extra hours. That's why you've been so distant. "Yes," Kevin said, his voice breaking completely. "I'm so sorry. I was too ashamed to tell you. I kept thinking I could fix it before you found out, but I can't. I've made minimum payments for 2 years and barely made a dent. We're drowning, and I did this to us." Jaden and Maya looked confused and scared. Denise moved closer to them, putting protective arms around her niece and nephew. Angela's shock was transforming into something else, not the explosion of anger everyone expected, but something quieter and more complex. She walked across the stage to stand in front of her husband. "You've been carrying this alone for 2 years," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't want to burden you," Kevin said. "I didn't want you to know what a failure I am. I'm supposed to provide for this family, and instead I destroyed our financial security." "You're an idiot," Angela said, but there was no venom in her voice. "You're an absolute idiot for hiding this from me. Do you have any idea what I've been thinking? I thought you were having an affair. I thought you were gambling. I thought you were doing something unforgivable." "This is unforgivable," Kevin said. "I took our money without asking. I hid debt from you. I lied every single day for 2 years. Steve Harvey stepped forward, his expression serious but compassionate. Hold on. Kevin, you just dropped a bomb on your wife on national television. Angela, you're processing this in real time. Both of you need to take a breath before this goes any further." He looked at Kevin. "Brother, why now? Why confess this here?" Kevin wiped his face. "Because I can't do it anymore. I can't keep lying. I can't keep pretending everything is okay when it's not. The question about hiding things from your wife, it just hit me that I've been hiding the biggest thing imaginable, and it's been killing me." Steve nodded slowly. "Angela, what's going through your mind right now?" Angela took a shaky breath. "I'm angry. I'm hurt that he didn't trust me with this, but honestly, I'm also relieved." "Relieved?" Steve repeated, surprised. "I've spent the last few months thinking my husband didn't love me anymore," Angela said. "I thought he was pulling away because he wanted out of our marriage. Learning that he's been stressed about money, that he's been working himself to death trying to fix a mistake, that's something we can handle. Debt is solvable. I thought he was keeping a secret that would end us. This secret might bury us financially, but it doesn't have to end our marriage." The audience, which had been dead silent, began to react with murmurs of surprise. This wasn't the explosive confrontation anyone had expected. Steve Harvey looked at Angela with a mixture of admiration and surprise. "Ma'am, your husband just told you he's been hiding $85,000 in debt for 2 years. You have every right to be furious. You have every right to walk off this stage. But you're standing here talking about how you can solve this together. Where is that strength coming from?" Angela looked at Kevin, then back at Steve. "I grew up poor, like really poor. My parents struggled with debt their entire lives. I watched them fight about money constantly. I watched my mother cry over bills she couldn't pay. But you know what else I watched? I watched them figure it out together. They never hid financial problems from each other, even when they were ashamed." She took a step closer to Kevin. "What my husband did was wrong. Taking our savings without telling me, hiding debt, lying for 2 years, all of that was wrong. But I also understand why he did it. Kevin grew up watching his mother struggle alone after his father left. He internalized this idea that being a man means handling everything by yourself, never asking for help, never showing weakness." Angela's voice grew stronger. "But that's not how marriage works. We're supposed to be partners. That means sharing burdens, not carrying them alone out of pride or shame. Kevin, you should have told me about the business investment before you made it. You definitely should have told me when it failed, but you didn't, and now we're here." "I'm so sorry," Kevin said again, his voice raw. "I know you are," Angela said. "And we're going to get through this, not because the debt is small, $85,000 is massive for us, but because I'd rather face financial problems with a husband who's honest than financial security with a husband who lies to me." Steve shook his head in amazement. "Angela Porter, you are teaching a master class in grace right now, but I need to ask, are you sure you're not just putting on a brave face, because this is a huge betrayal of trust?" "Oh, I'm furious," Angela said with a slight laugh. "Don't mistake my calm for lack of anger. When we get home, Kevin and I are going to have some very difficult conversations. He's going to account for every dollar, every decision, every lie he told. There are going to be consequences, but those consequences aren't going to include me leaving him." She looked at her children. "Jaden, Maya, I want you to watch this and learn something. Your father made a huge mistake, but he's also showing incredible courage by finally telling the truth. Your mother is choosing to respond with love instead of revenge. That's what commitment looks like, not perfection, but choosing each other even when it's hard." Steve turned to Kevin. "Brother, do you understand what you have in this woman? Do you understand the gift she's giving you right now?" Kevin nodded, unable to speak through his tears. Finally, he managed. "I don't deserve her. I know I don't. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be the husband she deserves. No more secrets. No more trying to handle everything alone. We're going to be actual partners from now on." Denise stepped forward. "Can I say something?" When Steve nodded, she continued. "I've watched my brother torture himself over this debt for 6 months. I begged him to tell Angela because I knew she would be upset, but I also knew she would help him figure it out. Kevin was raised to believe that asking for help is weakness, but Angela just showed him what real strength looks like." Steve addressed the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is one of the most remarkable things I've ever witnessed on this show. We expected anger and fireworks. Instead, we're seeing what real partnership looks like. Angela Porter just taught us all a lesson about marriage that's more valuable than any game show prize." He looked at both Kevin and Angela. "But here's what needs to happen next. Kevin, you need professional help, both financial counseling to deal with this debt and probably some therapy to address why you felt you had to handle this alone. Angela, you need support too, because even though you're responding with grace, this is still a betrayal that's going to take time to process." Angela nodded. "We'll do whatever it takes, but Steve, can I ask you something? You said I turned the tables. What did you mean by that?" Steve smiled. "Kevin confessed expecting you to destroy him. He probably thought this would be the end of your marriage. Instead, you responded with strength and grace that caught everyone off guard, including him. You turned what he thought would be his moment of ultimate failure into a moment that showed the strength of your partnership. That's turning the tables." He continued, "And you also turned the tables on all of us watching. We expected drama and anger. That's what usually happens when someone confesses a huge secret. But you gave us something better. You gave us an example of what love actually looks like when it's tested." The Porter family never finished their family feud game that day. Instead, what aired was an hour-long special about financial infidelity, the courage it takes to confess, and the extraordinary grace that true partnership can demonstrate. The episode became one of the most watched in the show's history, shared millions of times on social media with titles like "Wife's Response to Husband's Debt Confession Restores Faith in Marriage." But more importantly, what happened off-camera changed the Porter family's trajectory. Steve Harvey, moved by Angela's response and concerned about the family's financial crisis, made an announcement that brought the audience to tears. His foundation would help the Porter family access financial counseling and would contribute $25,000 toward their debt. "This isn't about erasing the consequences of Kevin's choices," Steve explained. "This is about giving this family a fighting chance to recover from a mistake that could have destroyed them. Angela's grace deserves to be met with grace from the rest of us." When the episode aired, the response was overwhelming. A GoFundMe campaign started by viewers raised an additional $48,000 for the Porter family. Financial advisors from across the country reached out, offering pro bono services to help them develop a debt repayment plan. The outpouring of support was a testament to how Angela's response had touched people's hearts. Kevin and Angela entered intensive financial counseling and marriage therapy. The therapist helped them understand the roots of Kevin's behavior. His childhood experiences with financial instability and his father's abandonment had created deep shame around financial failure. He had internalized the belief that he had to be perfect as a provider or risk being seen as worthless. The therapy sessions were difficult. Kevin had to confront patterns he had been running from his entire adult life. He realized that his compulsive need to handle everything alone had affected more than just finances. It had kept him emotionally distant from Angela, unable to share his fears or vulnerabilities about anything. The debt was just the most dramatic manifestation of a deeper problem. Angela worked through her own emotions with the therapist's help. While her public response had been graceful, privately she grappled with anger, hurt, and betrayal. She had to process the reality that her husband had lied to her face for 2 years, that he had made major financial decisions without her input, that he had risked their children's future without consulting her. In one particularly powerful session, Angela expressed the full depth of her hurt. "Every time I asked if something was wrong and you said no, you were lying to me. Every time I asked about our finances and you deflected, you were protecting your secret instead of our partnership. I feel like I've been married to a stranger." Kevin had to sit with that pain without defending himself, without making excuses. The therapist coached him on simply listening and acknowledging the harm he had caused. It was one of the hardest things he had ever done, harder even than the confession itself, to hear exactly how his choices had hurt the woman he loved. But Angela also came to understand something important. Kevin's secrecy wasn't about not trusting her, it was about not trusting himself. He was so ashamed of his failure that he couldn't bear for anyone, especially the woman he loved, to know about it. This understanding didn't excuse his behavior, but it helped her see it in a more complete context. Together, they created a new financial system for their household. Complete transparency became the foundation. Both of them had access to all accounts, all statements, all financial information. They instituted weekly money meetings where they reviewed their budget and debt repayment progress together. These meetings weren't just about numbers. They were about maintaining the openness that had been missing for 2 years. They established a rule that neither of them could spend more than $50 without discussing it with the other first. This boundary felt restrictive at first, especially to Kevin, who had been used to financial independence. But over time, he came to appreciate how the accountability removed the temptation to hide anything, no matter how small. The financial counselor helped them create a realistic 3-year plan to eliminate the debt. With Steve Harvey's contribution of $25,000 and the GoFundMe donations of $48,000, they had eliminated $73,000 of the $85,000 debt immediately. The remaining $12,000, while still daunting, felt manageable. Kevin continued working overtime, but now with Angela's knowledge and support. She would pack his lunches for the long days, and they would talk on his breaks. The overtime that had once felt like a shameful secret became a shared sacrifice they were making together for their family's future. With the donations, their own increased income from Kevin working overtime, now with Angela's knowledge and support, and a structured repayment plan, the Porters paid off the entire remaining $12,000 in 18 months. The day they made the final payment, they celebrated with their children at home with a simple dinner that felt more meaningful than any expensive celebration could have been. They renewed their commitment to financial honesty by creating a debt-free declaration that they hung in their kitchen, a reminder of what they had overcome together and a promise to never let financial secrets come between them again. But the real transformation wasn't financial, it was relational. Kevin learned to be vulnerable with his wife, to share his fears and failures instead of hiding them. Angela learned that her strength could create space for her husband's weakness, that grace didn't mean being a doormat, but rather choosing love without minimizing consequences. Jaden and Maya watched their parents model something crucial, that mistakes don't have to be fatal to relationships if they're met with honesty and grace. They saw their father's shame transform into humility and their mother's hurt transform into wisdom. They learned that marriage isn't about perfection, it's about how you handle imperfection together. 3 years after the Family Feud confession, Steve Harvey invited the Porter family back to the show. The difference was remarkable. Kevin stood taller, the weight of secrecy no longer bowing his shoulders. Angela's trust in her husband had been rebuilt through years of consistent honesty. Their children had watched a masterclass in resilience and partnership. "Tell us where you are now," Steve said to the couple. Kevin spoke first. "We're debt-free. More importantly, we're honest. I learned that my worth as a husband and father isn't measured by never making mistakes. It's measured by how I handle the mistakes I make. Angela taught me that real strength is vulnerability, not pretending to have everything together." Angela added, "I learned that grace doesn't mean accepting bad behavior. It means responding to confession with partnership instead of punishment." Kevin's mistake was huge, but his courage in finally telling the truth gave us the chance to fix things together. If he had continued hiding it, we would have eventually lost everything, including our marriage. The Porter family's story became a case study in financial recovery programs and marriage counseling training. Financial advisors used it to teach clients about the importance of transparency. Therapists used it to illustrate how shame drives secrecy and how grace can break that cycle. Angela began speaking at women's groups about responding to betrayal with strength rather than revenge. "People asked me how I didn't explode when Kevin confessed," she would say. "The truth is, I made a choice in that moment. I could respond from hurt and make him pay, or I could respond from love and make us stronger. I chose the harder path that led to healing instead of the easier path that led to destruction." Kevin spoke at men's groups about the danger of masculine pride and the freedom that comes from honesty. "I thought being a man meant never showing weakness, never asking for help, never admitting failure," he shared. "But that mindset nearly destroyed my marriage and my family. Real manhood is having the courage to be honest when you've messed up and trusting your partner to help you fix it." The couple also became advocates for financial literacy education, working with community organizations to teach young couples how to talk about money openly. They knew from experience that many financial secrets started small, a hidden purchase, a minimized expense, and grew into relationship-destroying lies. Steve Harvey remained a supporter and friend to the Porter family. He would reference their story in his relationship advice segments, holding Angela up as an example of strength and Kevin as an example of redemption. "That family showed us that confession, even when it's terrifying, is better than continuing to hide," Steve would say. "And they showed us that grace, when it's genuine, has the power to transform everyone it touches." The story of Kevin's confession and Angela's grace became a reminder that financial infidelity, like any betrayal, can survive in the darkness of secrecy but can be healed in the light of truth. Kevin's 2 years of hiding the debt had nearly destroyed his health, his peace of mind, and his marriage. But the moment he chose honesty, even though it was terrifying, the path to healing became possible. And Angela's response, choosing partnership over punishment, grace over revenge, didn't minimize the seriousness of Kevin's choices. Instead, it created the space for genuine accountability and change. She didn't pretend the betrayal didn't hurt. She acknowledged the pain while also choosing to focus on solutions rather than retribution. What started as a confession of hidden debt became a testimony about the power of truth and the strength of real partnership. The Porter family didn't win money on Family Feud that day, but they won something far more valuable. They won their way back to each other through honesty, grace, and the hard work of rebuilding trust one day at a time. If this story reminded you that confession is better than hiding and grace is stronger than revenge, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We share these powerful Family Feud moments because they teach us that our worst mistakes don't have to define us when we have the courage to be honest and the wisdom to respond with love.